Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, hazardous weather graphic. Dense smoke advisory continues here for the Kenai Peninsula, right on up into western Prince William Sound. That's out, I believe, until 1 p.m. on Sunday for continued smoky conditions like we've seen. In some cases, visibility is quite low. Seward was down to a quarter mile in smoke this morning, and that could happen again tomorrow anywhere in the advisory area here. And also there's a flood watch out for the Taya Inlet and the Klondike Highway area due to the very warm temperatures and snow melt that's occurring there, snow melt. And it looks like Taya River could go above flood stage sometime later Saturday afternoon, or reach minor flood stage. And for the fire danger chart, kind of a reduction in the extreme that we saw yesterday. Still areas of extreme fire danger up over the Yukon Flats, and then high fire danger extending southwestward in toward the lower Yukon River Valley area there, and then sort of just tapers off into the Delta. Some high fire danger there on the around Buckland, where the temperature reached 82 degrees this afternoon. And of course, sit in the valley, temperatures 86 at Big Lake, 84 in Talkeetna, and temperatures not so warm due to the smoke here in the Kenai Peninsula. But of course, high fire danger there, area just north of Iliamna. And the hot, dry conditions, Copper River Basin. We've got extreme fire danger now from the eastern Alaska Range down in toward Gulkana and along the valley there, with temperatures into the mid-80s this afternoon. And for the satellite imagery, you can see a lot of clear skies here with high pressure aloft centered over south central Alaska, also at the surface and into the Gulf. And the kind of a northeast flow here, that's just carrying the smoke southward or southwestward there, kind of away from the Anchorage area and then toward the southern inlet. I get to be Homer and Seldovia in those areas. And Kodiak Island, some clouds right off the coast, but a dry day today with some sunshine. And a lot of sunshine over the southeast coast, although the low clouds that developed over the southern inside channels taking a long time to burn off, and it's hanging tough here along the coast, at least into mid-afternoon today. Otherwise, temperatures well into the 70s with lower 80s, 81 at Gustavus and 82 at Juneau at the International Airport this afternoon. Even warmer up toward Haines on the highway, not Haines City, but another location. 86 degrees today, and that's helping to cause that snow melt, which could result in that river reaching minor flood stage. Otherwise, we have moisture streaming southeastward here, mostly in the form of clouds. There are a few showers up and through this area. Umiat Airfield picking up 0.14 of an inch of precipitation. That same moisture that's coming northward here across the Bering Sea, then kind of coming up and over the top of the ridge of high pressure, and bringing some light rainfall amounts across a good portion of the North Slope, actually, and the Arctic coast, with Atlasuk picking up about 1/10 of an inch of precipitation today. Otherwise, some clouds here in the Alaska Peninsula, and that was good for 0.04 of an inch of rain at Cold Bay, where they had northwest winds gusting to 30 miles an hour with high pressure building in behind this trough here. And that got a little breezy there this afternoon. Also could see some clearing here from the eastern Aleutians up to near the Pribilof Islands, right along that ridge axis, and then clouds. But clearing out, clear skies reported at Adak this afternoon, or at mid-afternoon, with south winds gusting 35 miles an hour. The rain shield here with the front still to the west, mostly over Amchitka, with rain, fog, and drizzle all the way out to Shemya. And clouds, but really not too much in the way of precipitation. I think Tin City picked up, or Wales picked up about 1/100 of an inch of thick dew or drizzle. And weak trough here really not doing much up over the northwest areas. And then that moisture giving a little precipitation in the central Arctic coast with showers over the eastern North Slope area, areas of smoke, of course, Kenai Peninsula, and also up over the central western interior. Those gray shaded areas there is smoke. Same thing here over the Kenai Peninsula. And for tonight, look for low clouds and fog to kind of redevelop here, especially over the southern southeast coast. Risk of a shower this evening over towards Stewart and Hyder, otherwise dry conditions. But that's going to reduce the visibility ceilings here, especially along the outer coastline tonight. Should stay fair to the east. And this weak trough just edges its way eastward of the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak, so that should keep the flow a little more on west or west-northwest, although it'll be pretty darn light with mostly clear skies back to the northwest. Isolated showers lingering there along the Alaska Peninsula. Chance of rain or that moisture coming up and caught up in that northwest flow over the top of the ridge. That'll continue for the central north slope back to the central Arctic coast, maybe down toward Point Lay. Otherwise dry there for maybe some clearing, Point Hope or Cape Lisburne. And the Seward Peninsula, just variable clouds out here along the west coast. And then quite an area of fog in the Gulf of Alaska. Could push some low clouds up into the North Gulf Coast, maybe Prince William Sound. And then for tomorrow, we'll see the front out west edges a little farther to the east here. We've got a very weak wave developing over the central Aleutians. So that'll be good to produce light rain, fog, and drizzle, or continue that once it gets going tonight. Better conditions back to the west toward Shimia. Better conditions under the ridge axis here for the Fox Islands. Variable clouds to mostly cloudy here in the west with the rain, light rain, fog, or drizzle. No big amounts expected with this front. Pushing eastward to the Pribilofs, north across St. Lawrence Island. And they actually picked up a little bit of rain at Gamble today. And that'll continue tomorrow into the Bering Strait, maybe clipping the northwest coast there. And pretty good chance of thunderstorms, or at least a slight chance, isolated thunderstorms, the way it looks now, developing over the eastern Brooks Range on over to near or just north of Eagle. Otherwise, probably some weak or some isolated development here along the Alaska Range. Possible thunderstorm there could develop out of any one of those, but it doesn't look really promising at all. And mostly sunny, warm again the southeast coast, and 85 to 95 here for the interior temperatures, upper Yukon Valley, or I'm sorry, south of the upper Yukon Valley being too many clouds, but here over much of the interior, temperatures approaching 90 in the Susitna Valley, as well as the Copper River Basin. And for Sunday, that front weakens, brings some clouds and showers into the west, and actually some moisture slides up to the northeast here. That'll probably be in the form of thunderstorms. They're coming across the Kuskokwim Valley into the central interior by afternoon and staying along and west of the Alaska Range. Slight chance of a thunderstorm developing over the eastern Alaska Range. Otherwise, a little more cloudy and cooler, but still into the 80s over southern Alaska and the eastern interior. Lows tonight in the mild lower 60s in the central areas, otherwise 40s, 50s everywhere else except the Arctic coast, a little cooler. Highs tomorrow, 85 to 90, Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, upper 80s for the greater Fairbanks area, and near 80 for McGrath, and mid-70s, lower 80s for the Panhandle. Lows the following morning, about the same, mild, lower 60s there for the eastern interior. Highs cooler with low 80s now over the eastern interior, probably still reaching 80 or better for places like Talkeetna, Big Lake, in the Kenai Peninsula.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to the first line weather graphic Saturday morning. IFR here from the Bering Strait, right on down along and in some cases off the coast here in toward Bristol Bay, and then becoming more widespread as you head southwest. VFR over the interior, marginal VFR right along the Arctic coast, and also the Gulf of Alaska, and then a big batch of IFR actually over the Gulf of Alaska, marginal VFR right up to the coastline, Kodiak Island, southern Panhandle, IFR in areas. That breaks out the VFR along just about all the southeast coast Saturday afternoon, and interior Alaska, VFR, except for the central eastern Arctic coast where there's some IFR slipping on in, and that extends into the Bering Sea, north side of the Alaska Peninsula, across most of the central western Aleutians. And for Sunday morning, not much change in that pattern, just kind of shifting around, becoming a little more widespread with the IFR out over the Bering and the Aleutians. Still north through the Bering Strait, coming up and around and along, just kind of grazing areas of the Arctic coast, especially the central coast there, Point Barrow. VFR in the interior once again, IFR hanging in the Gulf of Alaska here, and again, in over the southern southeast coast, VFR, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay. And the afternoon looks like the marginal VFR will stay, or the IFR will become marginal instead of vanishing altogether over the central southern southeast coast. See some intrusion here, moisture actually sliding northeastward. So we got marginal VFR even for Sunday afternoon, Kuskokwim Valley right up to the Alaska Range. Cook Inlet, Matanuska-Susitna Valley down to Kodiak Island, Copper River Basin, the entire east side up to most of the central western North Slope will be VFR. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik and Atigan, VFR flying, both passes Lake Clark and Merrill. VFR, rainy, VFR. Be some afternoon clouds buildups possible, but they'll be pretty far and few between, or the spaces will be quite in between the convection will be quite great. Windy, VFR, Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, same forecast. And for, get out of the way, Tenita, also VFR with Portage, looking good. VFR flying, marginal VFR staying away from that area. And for Chilkoot and White, VFR, freezing levels, upper level high, centered over southern Alaska. And the associated high freezing levels with subsiding air mass, 12,000 feet here over a good portion of interior Alaska. Not much cooler over the Panhandle, or you got to get all the way out to the northwest Bering there and get down to 6,000 feet. And for icing, band here of areas of light to possibly moderate rime icing in this band due to that pretty much where the frontal boundary is, and that southerly flow from the central Aleutians right up west of the Pribilofs to St. Lawrence Island and Bering Strait. And then that kind of dissipates, and this area here is sliding eastward across the eastern Beaufort Sea coast and North Slope during the day tomorrow. Otherwise, icing free for the remainder of the southeast coast. Upper level wind flow chart, jet stream 33,000 feet. Huge upper level ridge parked right over south central Alaska, the Kenai Peninsula tomorrow. And the flow, westerlies here coming across or into the Bering Sea and then taking a turn to the north right through the Bering Strait due to the blocking nature of the ridge, keeping the storminess out there, but they'll be kind of making a little bit of progress, at least the moisture on Sunday. And taking a look at 9,000 feet, we've got high pressure at this elevation too, more or less over Prince William Sound, kind of all across southern Alaska, the North Gulf Coast, and down into the Gulf of Alaska. And 15 to 20 knot westerlies increase here between this low over the Russian Far East and the high. Puts enough of a squeeze in the atmosphere, kick it up to 30 to 40 knots. Northern Bering in across the western Seward Peninsula, and some 25 knot winds sweeping in across the areas just south of the Brooks Range. Much lighter here over southern Alaska and the Panhandle. And for 3,000 feet, light winds, high pressure Gulf of Alaska. 5 to 15 knot winds here across the areas south of, say, the Tanana Valley into the Panhandle. Stronger out west there. We've got south to southwest, 25 to 30 knots right up across the Bering Strait, and then diminishing as it turns westerly there, and that's carrying that moisture eastward as well for the Arctic coast. Turbulence, be some areas of moderate chop, St. Lawrence Island, maybe the Bering Strait, as well as the Point Hope, Cape Lisburne area. And then possible turbulence there for the central Aleutians. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the sea ice conditions and the marine forecasts.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles in nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected and the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's Sea Ice Analysis. Still showing a reduced area of open water here north of the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and looks like a little bit of a southern, compared to yesterday, not much change here over the Chukchi Sea, and no big changes are expected for the next 5 days. On to coastal water forecasts, west winds 15 knots on the north coast, turn northwest at 15, central coast, and then very light southwest breeze at 10 on the south coast there. Seas just 3 feet, and south 15, 3 foot seas in Stevens Passage, or Clarence Strait, Stevens Passage south at 10, and 15 knot winds, Lynn Canal. Outlook for Sunday, pick up the 20 knots there for northern Lynn Canal in the afternoon. Otherwise, 15 knots for Stevens Passage with 3 foot seas. Light westerlies at 10 knots with slight seas for Clarence Strait. Same thing here all along the coast. Light west winds at about 10 knots with seas running 3 to 4 feet. And Prince William Sound, light southwest breeze tomorrow, 10 knots, seas 2 feet. West southwest 15 for the North Gulf Coast. A little bit higher for the Barren Islands, southwest at 20 there with 5 foot seas, west 15, Kamishak Bay, Cook Inlet, southerlies 10 to 15 knots, seas 3 to 4 feet. Outlook for Sunday, southwest 20, picking it up a little here for Cook Inlet, and of course that tend to blow smoke back to the north and northeast here from the Swan Lake fire. Seas as high as 7 feet south of the Forelands, west 20 knots, Kamishak Bay 6 foot seas, those westerlies right across the Barrens, and then pick up to about 25 knots there for the western North Gulf Coast, and then drop back down to 15 knots there toward Middleton Island. Prince William Sound winds stay light. And Kodiak Island, southwest 20 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet, west 20 there for Bristol Bay tomorrow. And the Alaska Peninsula, light winds southwest at 10, 3 to 4 foot seas, 10 knot winds all the way up to Sitkinak. And for Sunday, south 10 on the north side of the peninsula, Pacific side west at 10, 15 knots out of the west for Bristol Bay, and Kessel Cape to Sitkinak, west 15. And Chillicothe Strait, small craft advisory, southwest winds kicking up to 25 knots and about 20 knots there on the east side of Kodiak and Fogneck Islands. And for the Fox Islands tomorrow, looks like south to southwest or west to southwest to south, 15 to 20 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet, and 20 to 25 knot winds here for the central Aleutians, and southwest 25, west of Adak to about Kiska, and then drops down to 15 knots. And for Sunday, east winds at 20 there for the far western Aleutian zone, southeast 20 west of Adak, and for Adak and Atka, south to southeast at 20 knots. And then winds lighten up as you head east on Alaska Island all the way down to 10 knots from the south with these seas at 5 feet. And for the area south of Nunivak Island on the southwest coast, west winds 15 knots. North side along the Yukon Delta coast, we've got southerlies at 20 knots. Same thing for St. Matthew Island. Same thing for the Pribilofs, and the same for St. Lawrence Island. South 20, sea 7 feet. Norton Sound, southwest 15. And those pick up to 20 knots from the southwest for Norton Sound on Sunday. Same thing for St. Lawrence Island. Southwest 15 to 20, northern Bering Sea into the Yukon Delta coast. Southwest 15 here south of Nunivak Island. Light winds, south 10 for the Pribilofs. And for the Beaufort Sea area, we've got small craft advisories here from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort for 25-knot winds, 6-foot seas. Southwest 20 on the west side of the coast, southeast 20 there for the central coast, and then east at 20 for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast with 4-foot seas. And those 20-knot winds hold here from the east on the east side, southeast on the central coast, and then south winds at 15 for the western area, and then 20-knot winds Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales, 20-knot winds from the south with seas at 5 to 6 feet. And for tonight, we have this stationary, slowly, well, kind of holding its own, not really strong, but some pretty good winds, 35 miles an hour at AKwx. The rain here edging over toward AKwx later tonight, ridging dry in the west, clear in the east here, mild, lows in the 60s, central eastern interior. Highs tomorrow, 85 to 90 from the Tanana Valley down to the Copper River Basin. It's the Sitna Valley approaching 90, as well as places like Olcana, Chitina. And another sunny day for the Panhandle, still smoke for the Kenai Peninsula. And then some moisture pushes into the west and thunderstorm activity increases here on Sunday. Denali Park up into the central interior, just a slight risk there over the eastern Copper River Basin. Otherwise not so hot over the eastern and southern part of the state, but still some areas reaching the lower 80s.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.